Imagine standing in a place where two continents meet, where ancient empires once rose and disappeared, where mountains hide forgotten cities, and where the sea carries stories that are thousands of years old. Imagine watching the sun rise over valleys shaped by volcanoes, walking through streets built by Romans, standing beneath domes created by Ottoman architects, and looking across landscapes that seem to belong to another world. This is Türkiye, a country where geography and history are impossible to separate. Here, Europe meets Asia, the Mediterranean reaches toward the Middle East, and every road seems to lead toward another chapter of human civilization. Turkey is more than a destination on a map. It is a crossroads that has connected peoples, cultures, religions, and empires for thousands of years. From the ancient Greeks and Romans to the Byzantines, Seljuks, and Ottomans, generation after generation has left something behind. Sometimes it is a monumental city carved into stone. Sometimes it is a lonely fortress on a mountain. Sometimes it is a forgotten village, a sacred spring, or a natural wonder formed millions of years before humans ever arrived. And perhaps that is what makes Turkey so extraordinary. You can travel across the country and feel as though you are moving through different worlds. One moment, you are standing beside a turquoise Mediterranean coastline. Hours later, you can be surrounded by snow-covered mountains in the east. You can cross landscapes of salt and volcanic rock, enter valleys filled with strange stone formations, explore ancient theaters where thousands once gathered, and then arrive in Istanbul, a modern metropolis divided by the Bosphorus between Europe and Asia. But the greatest wonder is not simply what Turkey has preserved. It is what the land itself has created. Long before the first cities appeared, volcanoes shaped enormous regions of this country. Rivers carved deep valleys through mountains. Wind and rain slowly transformed volcanic rock into extraordinary formations. Earthquakes buried cities beneath layers of stone, while the sea swallowed ancient settlements along the coast. Nature was constantly changing the landscape, and human beings learned to adapt, build, worship, trade, and survive within it. Our journey begins far from the crowded streets of Istanbul, in the heart of central Türkiye, where the landscape carries the scars of an ancient volcanic past. Near the province of Konya lies Lake Mika, a remarkable volcanic crater lake formed millions of years ago. At first glance, it looks almost unreal. A dark volcanic cone rises from the center of a lake, creating a landscape that feels more like a distant planet than a familiar corner of Earth. The lake was born from violent geological forces when an ancient volcanic crater eventually filled with water. Later, volcanic activity created another cone inside the original crater, producing the unusual formation that can still be seen today. Standing here, it becomes easy to understand why landscapes like this inspire imagination. Turkey's natural wonders often seem to contain secrets written into the rocks themselves. And then, the journey moves from the forces of nature to the determination of humanity. High in the Pontic Mountains of northeastern Turkey stands Sumela Monastery, one of the country's most spectacular historical monuments. Built dramatically into the face of a steep cliff, the monastery appears to cling to the mountainside above a deep green forest. For centuries, monks came here seeking isolation, spirituality, and protection from the outside world. The location itself is extraordinary. Imagine reaching this remote mountain sanctuary centuries ago, long before modern roads existed. Every stone, every wall, and every chamber had to be created under difficult conditions. The monastery became not only a religious center, but also a symbol of human determination. Its walls have witnessed centuries of changing rulers, wars, earthquakes, and political transformations, yet it continues to rise above the forest. But Turkey's ancient stories are not confined to monasteries and ruins. In southeastern Anatolia, high above the surrounding landscape, stands one of the most mysterious monuments of the ancient world, Mount Nemrut. More than 2,000 years ago, King Antiochus I of Commagene chose this remote summit for a monumental sanctuary and royal tomb. Huge stone statues once represented gods and rulers, arranged around the summit as if watching over the mountains. Some statues have been damaged by time, their enormous heads now resting among the stones. Yet their presence remains powerful. Antiochus wanted his kingdom to stand between different cultural worlds. Greek, Persian, Armenian, and local traditions were brought together in a single monumental vision. On this lonely mountain, he attempted to create something that could survive his own lifetime. And somehow, it did. Today, visitors who climb Mount Nemrut before sunrise can watch the first light slowly illuminate the ancient stones. The mountains stretch into the distance. Shadows disappear from the valleys, and the faces of those ancient statues emerge from the darkness. It is one of those moments when history no longer feels distant. It feels present. But perhaps the most haunting places in Türkiye are those where nature itself seems to defy explanation. On the rocky slopes of Mount Chimaera, near the Mediterranean coast, flames have burned from the ground for centuries. Known as Yanartaş, or the Flaming Rock, these natural fires emerge through cracks in the rocks, fueled by gases rising from beneath the surface. Rain cannot easily extinguish them. Wind may make them flicker, but the flames continue. For the ancient people who lived nearby, such a phenomenon must have seemed supernatural. It became connected with the legendary Chimera, a mythical creature said to breathe fire. Over time, the natural flames and the ancient story became inseparable. And this is one of the defining characteristics of Türkiye. Here, geography becomes mythology. Mountains become sacred places. Springs become centers of worship. Ruins become legends. Natural formations become symbols. And stories that began thousands of years ago continue to influence how people understand the landscape today. Along the ancient Lycian coast, another extraordinary chapter waits among the cliffs. The Lycian rock tombs were carved directly into mountainsides more than 2,000 years ago. From a distance, they can resemble ancient houses or temples suspended high above the ground. Their elaborate facades feature columns, doorways, and architectural details designed to resemble the homes of the living. But these were houses for the dead. The Lycians believed that placing the tombs high above the ground could help the spirits of the deceased reach the afterlife. So instead of building enormous monuments on flat land, they transformed cliffs into eternal memorials. The technique was remarkable. Craftsmen worked directly into the rock, often carving from the top downward. With every movement of the tools, the mountain itself became part of the monument. And perhaps that is why these tombs still feel so powerful today. They are not buildings placed against nature. They are buildings created from nature. Further inland, the ruins of Sagalassos reveal another side of Türkiye's ancient world. Once a prosperous city in the mountains, Sagalassos was known for its architecture, trade, public spaces, baths, theaters, and fountains. Earthquakes eventually damaged the city, and its population gradually disappeared. Debris covered the ruins, hiding them for centuries. What seemed like destruction became protection. The layers of rubble helped preserve what remained beneath them, allowing archaeologists to uncover an ancient city that had been largely forgotten. Today, visitors can walk among its ruins and imagine the sounds that once filled these streets. Water flowing through fountains, conversations in public squares, crowds entering the theater, merchants moving through the city, life continuing as it had for generations. Then suddenly, the story changes again. From mountains and ancient cities, the landscape begins to open toward water. Manavgat waterfall spreads across a broad rocky ledge in southern Türkiye, creating a powerful curtain of flowing water. Unlike towering waterfalls that plunge from enormous heights, Manavgat is relatively low but remarkably wide. Its strength comes from volume, turning the entire river into a rushing wall of water. It is another reminder that Turkey's wonders are not defined by one type of landscape. There are volcanic lakes, sacred mountains, cliffside monasteries, ancient tombs, forgotten cities, forests, waterfalls, and endless coastlines. And we have only just begun. Because beyond these landscapes lies a country where legends become even more dramatic, where ancient civilizations built cities that still stand beside the Mediterranean, where enormous fortresses watched over trade routes, and where one mountain is forever connected with the story of Noah's Ark. Turkey's greatest secret may be that there is no single Türkiye. There are many. There is the Turkey of ancient kingdoms and forgotten civilizations, the Turkey of Ottoman palaces and magnificent mosques, the Turkey of turquoise seas and Mediterranean villages, the Turkey of volcanic mountains, hidden valleys, and extraordinary lakes. And there is the Turkey of legends, where stories passed from one generation to another still seem to live within the landscape. As we continue deeper into this remarkable country, the distance between history and imagination will become smaller. Because in Türkiye, sometimes the most incredible stories are not hidden in books. They are carved into mountains. They are buried beneath ancient cities. They rise from the sea, and they wait for those willing to travel far enough to discover them. There are places in Türkiye where the past does not feel buried. It feels as though it is still watching from the mountains, standing among the ruins and waiting beside the roads that have carried travelers for thousands of years. In this land, a journey through nature can suddenly become a journey through mythology, and a quiet landscape can reveal the remains of a civilization that once controlled entire regions. To understand Türkiye, you have to look beyond its famous cities and coastlines, because some of its greatest stories are hidden in places where the modern world seems very far away. Our journey continues toward the vast landscapes of central Anatolia, where ancient volcanic activity created some of the country's most unusual terrain. Millions of years ago, powerful volcanoes shaped the land around the central plateau. Lava and ash spread across enormous areas, creating layers of volcanic material that would eventually become the foundation for some of Türkiye's most extraordinary landscapes. Over countless centuries, wind, rain, snow, and rivers slowly transformed these layers, carving valleys, cliffs, and isolated formations from the softer rock. The result is a landscape that seems almost impossible to explain at first sight. But Türkiye's connection with volcanoes is not only visible in its scenery. It can also be found in places where water and fire have shaped the land in extraordinary ways. Lake Mike is one of the clearest examples. Located near Konya, this unusual crater lake was created by volcanic activity millions of years ago. The original crater eventually filled with water, and later volcanic activity formed another cone inside the lake. The result is a natural formation of nested volcanic structures, surrounded by the wide open landscape of central Anatolia. For ancient travelers crossing this region, such a place must have appeared mysterious. Even today, its unusual shape makes it feel like a landscape from another world. Yet, the real story of Türkiye is not only written by volcanoes. High in the Pontic Mountains, another monument appears to rise directly from the cliffs. Sümeyye Monastery is one of the most dramatic religious structures in the country. Perched high above a forested valley, the monastery seems almost impossible to reach. Its walls merge with the grey rock of the mountain, while the surrounding forests create a natural barrier between the sanctuary and the world below. The monastery was founded more than 1,000 years ago, although its traditions reach even further back. According to Christian tradition, monks came to the area after discovering an icon of the Virgin Mary associated with the Apostle Luke. Whether viewed through history, faith or legend, the story helped transform this remote cliff into one of the most important religious sites in the region. The location was not chosen simply for its beauty. Isolation was part of the purpose. For monks seeking a life of prayer and contemplation, the mountains offered a natural sanctuary. But building here demanded extraordinary effort. Stone had to be carried up steep slopes. Rooms and passages had to be constructed against the cliff. Walls had to withstand the mountain's harsh weather. The result is an architectural wonder that appears to grow from the landscape itself. Inside, the monastery contains remnants of frescoes and religious artwork, some weathered by centuries of exposure. Yet even in their damaged state, these images reveal the spiritual importance of the place. And when you step outside and look across the forested mountains, the reason becomes clear. This was a place designed to make the world below feel distant. From the mountains of the north, our journey moves toward one of Turkey's most remarkable archaeological landscapes. Mount Nemrut rises dramatically in southeastern Anatolia, far from the crowded resorts and modern cities. At its summit, enormous stone figures sit among the remains of a monumental sanctuary created more than 2,000 years ago. The story begins with King Antiochus I of Commagene. He ruled a relatively small kingdom positioned between powerful civilizations. Instead of choosing a single cultural identity, Antiochus created his own vision, combining elements from Greek, Persian, Armenian, and local traditions. He placed colossal statues of gods and rulers on the summit of Mount Nemrut, alongside inscriptions celebrating his reign. The scale of the project is extraordinary. These statues were carved from massive blocks of stone and transported to one of the highest points in the region. The king intended the monument to survive long after his death, preserving his name and his vision for generations. But time had other plans. The statues were eventually damaged. Their heads were separated from their bodies and scattered around the summit. The sanctuary lost its original purpose, and for centuries the mountain remained largely forgotten. Yet the stones survived. Today, the broken faces still stare across the horizon. At sunrise, the scene becomes almost surreal. The first light touches the ancient stones, revealing the features of gods whose worship disappeared thousands of years ago. Behind them, mountains stretch toward the distant horizon. It is impossible to stand there without thinking about time. Kings disappear. Empires disappear. Languages change. Religions change. But stone can remain. And sometimes, the most powerful monuments are not the ones that survived intact, but the ones that survived despite being broken. From the summit of Nemrut, Turkey's ancient world leads us toward another mystery, one created not by human hands, but by fire emerging from the earth. Along the Mediterranean coast lies Yanatash, the flaming rock. Here, natural flames rise continuously from cracks in a rocky hillside. The fire is produced by gases escaping from beneath the Earth's surface. But for ancient people who had no knowledge of geology, the phenomenon must have seemed extraordinary. They saw flames burning from solid rock. They saw a fire that could continue through darkness, and they created a story to explain it. Greek mythology tells of the Chimera, a terrifying creature with the body of a goat, the head of a lion, and the tail of a serpent. According to the ancient story, the creature breathed fire and lived in this region. The connection between the flames and the legend became so strong that the landscape itself became part of mythology. Even today, visitors can climb toward the flames and see them flickering against the darkness. There is something strangely powerful about standing beside a natural fire that may have inspired a story thousands of years ago. The Earth is producing the phenomenon. Human imagination gave it meaning, and together they created a legend that survived. But perhaps nowhere is the relationship between landscape and ancient belief more visible than along the Lycian coast. The Lycians were one of the ancient civilizations of Anatolia, known for their distinctive culture, maritime connections, and remarkable funerary architecture. Their rock tombs were carved directly into cliffs, often designed to resemble the houses and temples of the living. Look closely and you can see columns, doorways, decorative facades, and carefully carved details. These were not simple graves. They were monuments to identity. The Lycians believed that the dead could journey into another world, and the elevated position of the tombs may have reflected their beliefs about the afterlife. By placing the tombs high on cliffs, they transformed the mountains into sacred landscapes. Imagine the work involved. There were no modern machines, no electric tools, no cranes lifting stone into position. The craftsmen relied on hand tools, experience, patience, and an understanding of the rock itself. They carved into cliffs from above, gradually shaping the surface until the monument emerged. The result is astonishing because the mountain became the architecture, and that idea appears repeatedly across Türkiye. Human beings did not simply build against nature. They built into it. They carved homes into rock, monasteries into cliffs, tombs into mountains, and cities into valleys. Farther along the ancient landscape, another civilization left behind an equally fascinating story. Sagalassos once stood as a prosperous city high in the mountains. During the Roman period, it became an important regional center filled with monumental buildings, public baths, theaters, fountains, and temples. Then disaster arrived. A series of earthquakes damaged the city, and over time its population declined. Buildings collapsed, streets disappeared beneath debris, and eventually the city faded from memory. But the destruction also created an unexpected form of protection. The rubble covered the remains. For centuries, Sagalassos rested beneath layers of earth and stone, protected from later development. When archaeologists began uncovering the city, they found remarkable evidence of ancient life. The ruins revealed a sophisticated urban environment, complete with public spaces and monumental architecture. One of its most striking features is the monumental fountain, reconstructed from ancient fragments. Water once flowed through the city, creating a gathering place for residents. Standing among these ruins today, it is easy to imagine the city when it was alive. People walking through the streets, merchants selling goods, citizens gathering in public spaces, travelers arriving from distant regions, and above them all, the mountains remaining exactly where they had always been. This is the strange power of Turkey's ancient ruins. They do not simply tell us that civilizations existed. They allow us to imagine how those civilizations felt, their ambitions, their beliefs, their fears, their daily lives, and their desire to leave something behind. As the mountains give way to lower landscapes, another spectacle appears. Manavgat waterfall spreads across a broad section of the river, creating a powerful curtain of rushing water. Unlike a towering waterfall that plunges from a great height, Manavgat is wide and forceful, with the river pushing continuously over a low, rocky ledge. The water moves throughout the year, fed by the surrounding mountain system. Here, the ancient stories of kings and gods seem to disappear for a moment. There are no colossal statues, no ruined temples, no forgotten kingdoms, only water, rock, forest, and sound. And perhaps that contrast is what makes the journey through Turkey so compelling. One moment you are standing before a monument created by a king who wanted to defeat time. The next, you are watching a river continue its journey exactly as it has for countless generations. Human history can feel enormous, but nature is older still. The mountains were here before the kingdoms. The rivers flowed before the cities. The wind crossed these valleys before the first traveler left a footprint. And somewhere between those ancient forces and the civilizations that rose upon them, Turkey became what it is today. A country where every landscape carries layers of memory. A country where a monastery can cling to a cliff, where fire can rise from the earth, where ancient tombs can transform mountains into monuments, and where forgotten cities can reappear after centuries beneath the ground. But the journey is far from over. Beyond these mountains and ruins lie vast salt lakes, crystal-clear waters, ancient theaters, legendary cities, and a coastline where some of the Mediterranean's greatest civilizations once flourished. The deeper we travel into Turkey, the more the country reveals its greatest secret. Its wonders are not isolated. They are connected by mountains, by rivers, by ancient roads, by trade routes, by myths, and by thousands of years of human history. And ahead, the landscape is about to change once again. Turkey has a way of changing its character without warning. A mountain road can lead into a silent valley, a dry plateau can suddenly reveal a shimmering lake, and a landscape that appears almost lifeless can become one of the most extraordinary places in the country. Beyond the ancient monasteries and stone monuments, Turkey is home to natural wonders shaped by salt, water, volcanoes, wind, and time. Some are peaceful and beautiful. Others are wild and dramatic. And many carry stories that are just as fascinating as the landscapes themselves. Our journey now moves deeper into the heart of Anatolia, toward a place where the horizon seems to stretch forever. Lake Tuz, or the Salt Lake, is one of Turkey's most remarkable natural landscapes. Spread across a vast basin in central Anatolia, it is one of the country's largest lakes and one of the most unusual. During much of the year, its shallow waters reflect the sky like an enormous mirror. But as temperatures rise and evaporation increases, the lake begins to transform. Water retreats, salt crystals emerge, and the landscape becomes almost completely white. Walking across parts of Lake Tuz can feel like stepping onto another planet. The surface is bright beneath the sun, the horizon appears endless, and the boundary between earth and sky seems to disappear. The lake is also an important habitat for wildlife, particularly flamingos that gather in the surrounding wetlands. Against the pale landscape, their presence creates an extraordinary contrast. But Lake Tuz has another fascinating feature. Under the right conditions, microorganisms living in its highly saline waters can create striking colors, sometimes giving sections of the lake a pink or reddish appearance. It is a reminder that even environments that seem too harsh for life can support ecosystems adapted to extreme conditions. For centuries, salt from this region has also been an important natural resource. What appears to be a simple white landscape is actually a living geological and ecological system. And then, not far away, another lake offers a completely different experience. Lake Salda is famous for its brilliant turquoise waters, white shores, and unusual mineral composition. Surrounded by mountains and forests, it looks almost tropical in certain conditions, yet its setting is firmly within southwestern Anatolia. The clarity of the water creates an almost unreal effect. The shoreline appears bright and pale. The lake reflects the surrounding mountains, and the deep blue-green water changes character as sunlight moves across its surface. But Lake Salda has attracted attention for more than its beauty. Its mineral deposits, particularly hydromagnesite, have interested scientists because similar minerals can be associated with environments on Mars. Researchers have studied the lake as an example of how certain geological processes can occur on Earth under conditions that may help us understand the red planet. Suddenly, a beautiful Turkish lake becomes connected to a much larger question. Could studying Earth's landscapes help us understand worlds beyond our own? This is what makes Turkey's natural wonders so fascinating. They are not only beautiful places to visit, they are also geological records. Every layer of rock, every mineral, and every unusual formation contains information about how the planet changes over time. Mount Ararat rises dramatically near the borders of Turkey, Armenia, and Iran. Its enormous volcanic form dominates the surrounding landscape, often appearing above the clouds like an isolated world. For centuries, Mount Ararat has carried a powerful place in human imagination because of its association with the biblical story of Noah's Ark. According to the book of Genesis, the Ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat after the Great Flood. The story has inspired explorers, researchers, adventurers, and treasure hunters for generations. Many have searched the mountain and surrounding region for evidence of the Ark, but no definitive archaeological evidence has confirmed the existence or location of the biblical vessel. And yet, the legend continues. Perhaps that is because Mount Ararat itself seems perfectly suited to inspire stories. Its enormous slopes rise from the surrounding plains. Its summit is often covered in snow and ice. Clouds gather around the upper mountain, sometimes hiding the peak completely. From a distance, it appears almost unreachable. The mountain is not simply a geological landmark. It has become a symbol of survival, a symbol of mystery, and a reminder that some stories remain powerful even when their mysteries are never completely solved. From the heights of Ararat, Turkey's geography begins to reveal another dramatic side. In the northeast, the landscape becomes wetter, greener, and more mountainous. Here, rivers descend through steep valleys, creating spectacular waterfalls. Tortum Waterfall is among the most impressive. The waterfall plunges from a high rocky edge, surrounded by dramatic mountain scenery. The water gathers below before continuing through the valley, creating a landscape where geology and flowing water seem to work together. The waterfall was created through geological changes that altered the course of the river, eventually producing the dramatic drop seen today. But what makes Tortum especially interesting is that its power is not simply admired. it is also used. Hydroelectric infrastructure nearby takes advantage of the movement of water to generate electricity. It is a striking example of how modern technology can coexist with a landscape shaped by forces far older than civilization itself. The river that once carved the valley now helps power human life. And still, the water continues to fall. Further west, another waterfall offers a completely different experience. Manavgat waterfall is lower but wider, with a powerful flow spreading across the rocky landscape. The river comes from the Taurus Mountains, carrying cold mountain water toward the Mediterranean. Unlike a dramatic vertical plunge, Manavgat creates its beauty through movement and volume. The water rushes continuously across the rocks, creating a broad curtain of white foam. Around it, trees and vegetation soften the landscape, creating a natural retreat from the heat of the southern coast. But Turkey's natural wonders are never far from history. The mountains surrounding Manavgat have been crossed by travelers for thousands of years. Ancient roads connected inland settlements with Mediterranean ports. Caravans carried goods through mountain passes. Armies moved across valleys, and cities grew wherever water and fertile land allowed people to settle. This connection between nature and civilization becomes even clearer as we move toward the Mediterranean. Before reaching the coast, however, there is another landscape that demands attention. The Taurus Mountains form one of the great natural backbones of southern Turkey. They rise behind the Mediterranean coast, creating dramatic contrasts between mountains and sea. In some areas, the peaks are rugged and dry. In others, forests cover the slopes. Snow can remain on the highest elevations, while beaches below are warm and bright. This extraordinary variation has shaped human settlement for centuries. The mountains provided natural protection. The valleys provided routes through difficult terrain. Rivers supplied water, and the coastline opened routes toward the wider Mediterranean world. It is here that Turkey's ancient civilizations began to develop some of their most remarkable coastal cities. But before we reach them, the landscape reveals one more extraordinary connection between geology and culture. Across Anatolia, volcanic landscapes have repeatedly influenced human life. People learned to use soft volcanic rock for construction. They carved homes and sanctuaries into mountainsides. They settled near fertile volcanic soils, and they adapted to environments that could be both dangerous and extraordinarily productive. In Cappadocia, these processes would eventually create one of the most famous landscapes on Earth. But before the journey reaches that surreal region, it is worth understanding the geological forces that made it possible. Volcanoes such as Mount Hassan, along with other major volcanic centers of central Anatolia, released enormous quantities of ash and rock over ancient landscapes. Over time, layers of soft volcanic material formed across the region. Then came erosion, wind, rain, snow, temperature changes. For thousands and thousands of years, these forces slowly carved the land. The result was not created overnight. It was sculpted grain by grain, valley by valley, rock by rock. And eventually, humans arrived. They looked at these unusual formations and saw possibilities. They carved chambers into the stone. They created homes. They built churches. They established monasteries. They created entire underground settlements. The landscape that nature had formed became a place where civilization could grow. This is one of the most fascinating patterns throughout Turkey. Nature creates the stage. Human beings transform it into a story. The lakes of Anatolia reveal the hidden chemistry of the earth. The mountains preserve ancient legends. The waterfalls demonstrate the power of water. And the valleys reveal how civilizations learned to live within extraordinary environments. Yet there is another side to Turkey's natural beauty. Some places are not simply peaceful. They are powerful. The same mountains that provide water can create isolation. The same rivers that sustain cities can carve deep gorges. The same volcanoes that create fertile landscapes can also reshape entire regions. For thousands of years, people have lived with these forces. They built villages near rivers. They established cities on mountain slopes. They developed roads through difficult terrain. They created legends to explain natural phenomena they could not yet understand. And eventually, they built monuments that remain long after the people who created them have disappeared. As the sun begins to move toward the western horizon, the landscape changes once again. The bright salt plains of central Anatolia are far behind. The deep blue waters of Lake Salda disappear into the distance. Mount Ararat remains on the eastern horizon, and the road begins to lead toward the Mediterranean. Ahead lies a world of ancient theaters, ruined temples, forgotten ports, and cities that once connected Türkiye to the entire Mediterranean civilization. Places where Roman engineers built enormous structures, where Greek philosophers and traders passed through, where Lycian tombs were carved into cliffs, where ancient ships entered harbors carrying goods from distant lands, and where the ruins of once great cities still stand beneath the same sun that illuminated them thousands of years ago. Turkey is beginning to reveal another secret. Its greatest natural wonders did not exist separately from its history. They shaped it. The mountains determined where people traveled. The rivers determined where they settled. The lakes provided resources. The coastline connected civilizations. And the volcanic landscapes offered materials for homes, temples, and entire cities. This is why traveling across Türkiye feels different from simply visiting historical sites. The land itself is part of the story. Every mountain has a memory. Every river has a route. Every valley has a history. And every horizon seems to promise another discovery. Now, as our journey leaves the wild landscapes of Anatolia and moves toward the Mediterranean coast, we are about to enter the world of ancient empires. Here, stone theaters still face the sky. Roman aqueducts cross valleys. Ancient libraries rise from ruined cities. And roads built thousands of years ago still guide us through the remains of civilizations that once believed they would last forever. But they left something behind. And today, we can still walk through it. There is a moment when the landscape of Türkiye changes completely. The mountains begin to open, the air becomes warmer, and somewhere in the distance, the deep blue of the Mediterranean begins to appear. But this coastline is not simply a place of beaches and sunlight. Beneath the modern resorts and quiet villages lies another world, one built by civilizations that understood the power of the sea. For thousands of years, the Mediterranean coast of Turkey has been a highway between civilizations. Greek sailors arrived here searching for new settlements. Lycian kingdoms controlled rugged coastal territories. Persian influence reached across Anatolia. Alexander the Great passed through these lands. Roman armies transformed the region into one of the most important parts of their empire. Later, Byzantines and Ottomans inherited the same coastline. Today, fragments of these civilizations remain scattered among forests, mountains, beaches, and cliffs. And perhaps nowhere is this connection between nature and history more dramatic than at Aspendos. Hidden not far from the Mediterranean coast, the ancient city of Aspendos is home to one of the best preserved Roman theatres in the world. From the outside, its enormous stone structure already feels impressive. But the real wonder appears when you imagine it filled with people. The theatre could accommodate around 15,000 spectators. Thousands of citizens could gather here to watch performances, ceremonies, and public events. The semicircular seating rises around the stage, creating a perfect environment for both spectacle and sound. Roman engineers understood something that still fascinates visitors today. Acoustics matter. A voice spoken on the stage can travel remarkably well toward the upper seats, even without modern sound equipment. The theatre was built during the Roman period, when Aspendos was an important center of regional trade and culture. Its prosperity was supported by agriculture, commerce, and its connection to surrounding routes. But the theatre was only one part of the city. Aspendos also possessed an impressive aqueduct system. The remains of the aqueduct still cross the landscape, carrying the story of Roman engineering across valleys and hills. For the Romans, water was not simply a natural resource. Water was civilization. Reliable water supplies allowed cities to grow, baths to operate, fountains to flow, and populations to expand. Aqueducts were carefully engineered to maintain a controlled gradient over long distances, moving water from distant sources toward urban centers. The fact that substantial sections of the Aspendos aqueduct survive today is a reminder of how ambitious Roman infrastructure could be. But as impressive as Aspendos is, the Mediterranean coast holds an even greater ancient city. Ephesus. Once one of the most important cities of the ancient Mediterranean, Ephesus became a center of trade, religion, politics, and culture. Walking through its ruins today, it is easy to underestimate what this place once was. The marble streets were not empty pathways. They were crowded with people, merchants, travelers, officials, religious pilgrims, artisans, citizens. Ships arrived carrying goods from distant parts of the Mediterranean, while roads connected Ephesus to the interior of Anatolia. The city grew wealthy and powerful, and then its architecture began to reflect that wealth. The Great Theatre rises dramatically from the hillside. It could hold around 25,000 spectators, making it one of the largest ancient theatres in the region. But this was more than a place for entertainment. Public spaces like this could also become places where political and social issues were discussed. The theatre became part of the city's public life. Nearby stands the magnificent facade of the Library of Celsus. Although the original library was destroyed and much of what remains has been reconstructed from surviving fragments, the facade still gives an extraordinary impression of Roman architectural ambition. Columns rise across multiple levels. Statues once occupied niches. Decorative details transformed the building into a monument not only to knowledge, but also to power and prestige. Yet Ephesus was not only Roman. Its story reaches much further back. The city was associated with the worship of Artemis, one of the most important deities of the ancient Greek world. The Temple of Artemis became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Today, little remains of the enormous structure, but the absence itself is powerful. It forces us to imagine what once stood here: massive columns, sculptures, pilgrims, ceremonies, and crowds arriving from distant lands. The temple was not simply a religious building. It was an economic and cultural center. Its influence extended far beyond the immediate city. This is the strange beauty of archaeological sites like Ephesus. The ruins are incomplete, yet sometimes the missing pieces make the imagination stronger. From Ephesus, the journey continues south toward the ancient Lycian coast, where mountains meet the Mediterranean in dramatic fashion. Here lies Patara. More than 2,000 years ago, Patara was an important Lycian and later Roman city. Its position along the coast gave it access to maritime trade, while its harbor connected it with the wider Mediterranean world. But Patara is perhaps most famous today for the extraordinary beach that stretches beside its ancient ruins. Imagine walking across soft sand with the remains of an ancient civilization nearby. The contrast is remarkable. One side belongs to nature, the other belongs to history. The dunes shift with the wind, while the stones of ancient buildings remain fixed beneath the sun. Patara also holds a remarkable connection with one of history's most famous figures. According to tradition, Saint Nicholas was born in nearby ancient Lycia, in the region associated with Patara and Myra. Centuries later, stories about him would help inspire the figure of Santa Claus. It is an unexpected connection. A Mediterranean settlement in ancient Anatolia, a Christian bishop, a legendary gift-giver, and eventually one of the world's most recognizable cultural figures. This is how history travels. It changes as it moves from one generation to another. From Patara, the coastline becomes increasingly dramatic. Cliffs rise above turquoise water. Ancient roads disappear into forests. And scattered among the mountains are the remains of cities that once depended on the sea. Phaselis is one of them. Founded by Greek settlers from Rhodes around the 7th century BC, Phaselis became an important maritime city. Its strength came from its location. The city possessed several natural harbors, allowing ships to enter safely and trade with other parts of the Mediterranean. Walking through the ruins today, visitors can follow the ancient main street between trees and stone remains. The city once contained baths, theaters, markets, temples, and public buildings. But perhaps the most fascinating part is how close the ruins remain to the sea. The ancient people who lived here would have heard waves breaking against the same coastline. They would have watched ships approaching the harbor. They would have walked these streets, carrying goods from distant lands. Today, the forest has reclaimed parts of the city. Roots grow around stones. Branches stretch above ancient walls. Nature is slowly becoming part of the ruins. Farther along the coast lies Olympos, another ancient settlement surrounded by dramatic landscapes. The city was once an important center of trade and culture, but over time it declined and was eventually abandoned. Its ruins now lie among dense vegetation, creating an atmosphere very different from the open marble streets of Ephesus. Here, ancient walls seem to disappear into the forest. Stone arches emerge between trees. Paths lead toward the remains of temples and public buildings. And nearby, the Mediterranean continues to shine beneath the same sun. But Olympos has another connection to one of Turkey's most enduring legends. Not far from the ruins are the natural flames of Yanataş. Gas rising through cracks in the rocks produces flames that have burned for centuries. For the ancient Greeks, this phenomenon became associated with the chimera. So the mythology of the region was not simply written in books. It was written into the landscape. The flames were real. The mystery was real. And the story grew around them. Further west, another ancient Lycian settlement reveals how dramatically people once adapted to the coastline. Simena, known today as Kalaköy, can only be reached by boat or on foot. Its ruins rise above the water, crowned by a Byzantine-era castle. The setting is extraordinary. Ancient stone structures overlook the Mediterranean. Below, the sea is filled with the remains of a submerged settlement. Parts of the ancient city disappeared beneath the water after earthquakes and geological changes. Streets that once carried people now lie beneath the waves. Buildings that once stood above the sea have become part of an underwater archaeological landscape. It is a reminder that civilizations are never completely in control of nature. A city can flourish for centuries. Then one earthquake can transform its entire world. The sea can become a road. A street can become a reef. A house can become an archaeological site. And the landscape continues. This is perhaps one of the most powerful lessons of the Mediterranean coast. Human beings build with the hope that their cities will last forever. Nature has its own timetable, but even when cities disappear, traces remain. A carved tomb, a broken column, an ancient road, a theater, a harbor, a wall. Together, these fragments allow us to reconstruct the lives of people who lived thousands of years ago. And then there are places where the architecture itself becomes a symbol of survival. Along the southern coast, Alanya Castle rises above a rocky peninsula overlooking the Mediterranean. Its walls follow the shape of the land, stretching across the peninsula and connecting towers, gates, and defensive structures. The castle's position was strategic. From its heights, ships approaching the coast could be observed.
The surrounding sea became a natural defense. The cliffs made direct attacks difficult. And the walls transformed the entire peninsula into a fortress. Today, walking along the old walls offers a completely different experience. Instead of soldiers watching for approaching enemies, visitors look across the Mediterranean. Instead of warning signals, there is the sound of wind and waves. The fortress remains. The purpose has changed. And that transformation can be seen throughout Türkiye. Buildings that once protected kingdoms have become monuments. Temples have become ruins. Theaters have become archaeological sites. Ancient roads have become hiking paths. And harbors once crowded with ships are now quiet stretches of coastline. Yet the stories remain. As the sun begins to set over the Mediterranean, the ruins take on a different character. Stone becomes golden. The mountains turn dark against the horizon. The sea reflects the final light of the day. And for a moment, it becomes possible to imagine the coastline as it might have appeared thousands of years ago. Ships moving between ancient ports. Fishermen returning from the sea. Travelers arriving from distant civilizations. Merchants carrying goods across Anatolia. And people gathering in theaters, temples, markets, and public squares. Türkiye's Mediterranean coast is not simply beautiful. It is a living archive. A place where nature and civilization have been interacting for thousands of years. But our journey is now moving toward a landscape unlike anything we have seen before. Away from the blue Mediterranean, beyond the ancient roads and coastal ruins, the land begins to transform. Volcanic rock rises from the earth. Valleys twist through strange formations. Caves appear inside cliffs. And entire communities seem to have been carved from stone. Ahead lies Cappadocia. A place where the boundary between nature and human imagination almost disappears. And when the first light of dawn reaches its valleys, the landscape will reveal one of the most extraordinary sights anywhere on Earth. At first light, the landscape of Cappadocia begins to change. The darkness slowly retreats from the valleys. The first rays of sunlight touch the tops of strange rock formations, and one by one, hot air balloons begin to rise above the horizon. Beneath them lies a world of towering cliffs, hidden chambers, ancient churches, winding valleys, and stone formations that seem to belong to another planet. It is difficult to believe that this landscape is real. Yet every strange shape has a geological story, and every carved chamber carries a human one. Cappadocia may be one of the most recognizable landscapes in Türkiye, but seeing it for the first time still feels like discovering something unknown. Millions of years ago, powerful volcanic eruptions transformed this part of central Anatolia. Volcanoes such as Mount Erça and Mount Hasan released enormous quantities of ash and volcanic material across the surrounding plains. Over time, that material hardened into layers of soft rock. Then nature began its slow work. Wind attacked the surface. Rain entered cracks. Snow expanded inside the rock. Rivers cut through valleys. And over thousands upon thousands of years, the softer layers were gradually removed. What remained were pillars, cliffs, valleys, and isolated formations. These became the famous fairy chimneys of Cappadocia. Some stand like narrow towers. Others resemble enormous mushrooms. Some appear like castles. Others seem to have been sculpted deliberately by human hands. But nature created the basic forms. Human beings simply recognized an opportunity. They began carving into the rock. And that changed Cappadocia forever. The valleys became homes. The cliffs became churches. The rock formations became monasteries. And underground, entire settlements were created beneath the surface. One of the most remarkable areas is Göreme Valley. Today, Göreme is surrounded by dramatic rock formations and ancient cave structures.
But centuries ago, this region became an important center of Christian monastic life. Early Christians living in Cappadocia found protection in the unusual landscape. The soft volcanic rock could be carved relatively easily, allowing people to create rooms, chapels, storage spaces, and shelters. Over time, these simple chambers became increasingly sophisticated. Walls were decorated with religious paintings. Churches were carved into cliffs. Monasteries appeared inside valleys, and entire communities developed around the rock formations. The Göreme Open Air Museum provides one of the clearest examples of this extraordinary tradition. Inside the rock-cut churches are frescoes depicting biblical scenes and Christian figures. Although many have suffered damage over the centuries, their colors and details still reveal the importance of these spaces. Imagine entering one of these churches centuries ago. Outside, the valley would have been quiet. Inside, the walls would have been covered with images designed to tell sacred stories to people who may not have been able to read. The rock itself became a canvas, and the valley became a sanctuary. But Cappadocia's most impressive achievement may not be above ground. It may be below it. Across the region, underground cities were carved deep into volcanic rock. Some contained living spaces, kitchens, storage rooms, wells, ventilation shafts, churches, and passages connecting different levels. These were not simple caves. They were carefully organized underground environments. People could descend into them and remain protected from threats on the surface. One of the most famous examples is Derinkuyu, an enormous underground city extending many levels beneath the ground. The deeper you travel, the more extraordinary the engineering becomes. Narrow passages could be blocked with massive circular stone doors. Ventilation shafts allowed air to move between levels. Storage rooms could hold food. Water sources provided essential supplies. And religious spaces allowed communities to maintain their spiritual traditions. The exact reasons different underground complexes were built and used changed over time, but their existence demonstrates the remarkable ability of people to adapt to their environment. Cappadocia offered something unique. The rock was soft enough to carve. The valleys provided natural protection. The underground offered shelter. And the landscape itself created a network of hidden spaces. This is why Cappadocia feels less like a collection of monuments and more like an entire civilization shaped from stone. Yet there is another valley that shows how strange these formations can become. Love Valley is famous for its tall, slender rock pillars that rise dramatically from the ground. Their unusual shapes were created by erosion, but their appearance has given the valley a playful and romantic identity. The formations stand close together, creating a surreal landscape of stone towers stretching toward the sky. At sunrise and sunset, the colors change constantly. Gray becomes gold. Gold becomes orange. Shadows stretch across the valley, and the formations seem to transform with the light. This is one of the reasons Cappadocia has become famous around the world for hot air balloon flights. From the ground, the valleys are impressive. From above, they become something else entirely. Hundreds of meters below, the landscape unfolds like an enormous natural sculpture. Fairy chimneys rise from the valleys. Winding paths disappear between cliffs. Ancient cave homes blend into the rock, and the distant volcanoes create a dramatic horizon. As the balloon rises higher, the relationship between the natural and human landscapes becomes even clearer. You can see how valleys shaped settlements, how roads followed the terrain, how people carved into the cliffs, and how thousands of years of erosion created the foundation for all of it. But Cappadocia has another symbol of its ancient landscape: Uçhisar Castle. Rising above the surrounding valleys, this enormous rock formation is filled with chambers and tunnels carved into its interior. From the outside, it resembles a natural fortress. From the summit, the views are extraordinary. The valleys extend toward distant mountains. Fairy chimneys cover the landscape, and the settlements appear small beneath the enormous sky. For centuries, the high position of Uçhisar made it a valuable defensive location. People could observe the surrounding region from the top. The rock provided shelter, and the tunnels created protected spaces inside the formation. Today, visitors climb toward the summit and experience something the ancient inhabitants already understood. Height gives perspective. From above, Cappadocia no longer looks like a collection of separate valleys. It becomes one enormous landscape. And beyond it rises Mount Hassan. This dormant volcano stands prominently over the central Anatolian plateau. With its broad volcanic form and two distinctive peaks, Mount Hassan has been a landmark for people traveling across the region for thousands of years. Its presence is especially important because the volcanic history of Cappadocia is directly connected to mountains like Hassan. Without the eruptions that created the volcanic layers, the fairy chimneys and valleys would not exist in their present form. The mountain is therefore more than a backdrop. It is part of the origin story. It helped create the world we see below. Ancient communities also gave mountains spiritual meaning. The Hittites, one of Anatolia's earliest great civilizations, considered mountains sacred and associated them with the divine. Across ancient cultures, high places often became spaces of worship. The mountains seemed closer to the sky, closer to the gods. And in Cappadocia, that spiritual relationship continued for centuries. Another extraordinary place is the Ilara Valley. Carved by the Melendez River, the valley stretches for many miles through dramatic canyon walls. Unlike the dry and exposed landscapes of some parts of Cappadocia, Ihlara can feel surprisingly green. Trees grow along the river. Birds move through the canyon. Water continues its journey beneath the cliffs. And hidden inside the rock are ancient churches and religious spaces. The valley offered isolation, water, fertile ground, and shelter. For religious communities, it was an ideal environment. Walking through Ihlara today is like moving through layers of time. The river has been flowing for generations. The cliffs have remained above it, and humans have left their marks inside the stone. Some of the churches contain faded frescoes, while others are little more than quiet chambers carved into the rock. But together they reveal how deeply people adapted to Cappadocia. They did not simply live beside the landscape. They became part of it. This is perhaps the greatest wonder of the region. The distinction between architecture and geology almost disappears. A cave can be a home. A rock tower can be a fortress. A cliff can be a church. A valley can be a monastery. An underground chamber can become a city. And a volcano can become the foundation of an entire civilization. As the day moves toward evening, Cappadocia becomes even more atmospheric. The crowds begin to disappear. The valleys grow quieter. The sun sinks behind the rock formations. Long shadows move across the ground, and the fairy chimneys become silhouettes against the sky. For a moment, the modern world feels distant. It becomes possible to imagine the people who once lived here. Monks entering a cave church, families descending into underground shelters, travelers crossing the valleys, farmers working the land, children growing up surrounded by stone formations they probably considered ordinary. For them, Cappadocia was not an exotic destination. It was home, and perhaps that is the most important thing to remember. The landscapes that seem extraordinary to us were once ordinary environments for people who learned to survive and flourish within them. The isolated position of the church also adds to its atmosphere. To reach it, visitors must cross the lake. As the boat approaches the island, the church gradually rises above the shoreline. For centuries, isolation played an important role in religious life. Remote islands, mountains, and valleys could become places for worship, contemplation, and protection. Akdamar reflects that tradition. It is both a work of architecture and a monument to a culture that once flourished throughout this region. And the surrounding landscape makes the experience even more powerful. The church stands between water and mountains, surrounded by a silence that feels almost timeless. But eastern Türkiye holds another remarkable connection with the past. Near Lake Van lies the ancient city of Alat. Its history stretches across thousands of years, and the region has been influenced by numerous civilizations. Yet Alat is particularly famous for its extraordinary collection of medieval tombstones. Across its historic cemeteries stand carved stone monuments decorated with intricate geometric patterns, inscriptions, and architectural details. The scale of the cemetery is remarkable. Rows of tombstones stretch across the landscape, each one representing an individual life. Some are enormous, others are more modest, but together they form an open-air archive of medieval Anatolian culture. The stones reveal more than names and dates. Their designs reflect artistic traditions, religious beliefs, social status, and craftsmanship. Walking among them creates a strange feeling. You are surrounded by thousands of people who are no longer here, yet their names and memories remain carved into stone. The cemetery becomes a reminder that history is not only about kings and empires, it is also about ordinary people, families, travelers, scholars, soldiers, craftsmen, people whose lives were once just as important to them as ours are to us. From the shores of Lake Van, the journey continues toward the mountains. Here, the landscape becomes increasingly dramatic, and rising above the region is Mount Ararat. Few mountains in Türkiye carry such a powerful combination of geography and legend. Its enormous volcanic mass dominates the horizon. The summit rises into the clouds, and snow and ice often cover its upper slopes. For centuries, Mount Ararat has been associated with the biblical story of Noah's Ark. According to the book of Genesis, the Ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat after the flood. The story has inspired countless searches. Explorers have climbed the mountain. Researchers have examined satellite imagery and geological formations. Adventurers have reported unusual discoveries. But no definitive archaeological evidence has confirmed the existence of Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat. The mystery remains, and perhaps that mystery is precisely what gives the mountain its extraordinary power. A mountain can be measured, its height can be calculated, its geological history can be studied, but its meaning is created by human imagination. For millions of people, Ararat is more than a volcano. It is a symbol of survival after catastrophe, a symbol of hope, and a place where faith and geography meet. Farther into eastern Türkiye, another monument rises dramatically above the landscape. İshak Pasha Palace appears almost like a fortress suspended among the mountains. Built during the Ottoman period, the palace combines architectural influences from Ottoman, Persian, and local traditions. Unlike a simple defensive fortress, it was designed as a large residential and administrative complex. Its walls, courtyards, gates, and decorative details reveal the ambitions of the people who built it. But the location may be even more impressive than the architecture. The palace overlooks a vast valley and distant mountains, creating a natural panorama that stretches toward Mount Ararat. Imagine living here centuries ago. The surrounding landscape would have been both beautiful and strategically important. Trade routes crossed the region. The isolated position of the church also adds to its atmosphere. To reach it, visitors must cross the lake. As the boat approaches the island, the church gradually rises above the shoreline. For centuries, isolation played an important role in religious life. Remote islands, mountains, and valleys could become places for worship, contemplation, and protection. Akdamar reflects that tradition. It is both a work of architecture and a monument to a culture that once flourished throughout this region. And the surrounding landscape makes the experience even more powerful. The church stands between water and mountains, surrounded by a silence that feels almost timeless. But eastern Türkiye holds another remarkable connection with the past. Near Lake Van lies the ancient city of Alat. Its history stretches across thousands of years, and the region has been influenced by numerous civilizations. Yet Alat is particularly famous for its extraordinary collection of medieval tombstones. Across its historic cemeteries stand carved stone monuments decorated with intricate geometric patterns, inscriptions, and architectural details. The scale of the cemetery is remarkable. Rows of tombstones stretch across the landscape, each one representing an individual life. Some are enormous, others are more modest, but together they form an open-air archive of medieval Anatolian culture. The stones reveal more than names and dates. Their designs reflect artistic traditions, religious beliefs, social status, and craftsmanship. Walking among them creates a strange feeling. You are surrounded by thousands of people who are no longer here, yet their names and memories remain carved into stone. The cemetery becomes a reminder that history is not only about kings and empires, it is also about ordinary people, families, travelers, scholars, soldiers, craftsmen, people whose lives were once just as important to them as ours are to us. From the shores of Lake Van, the journey continues toward the mountains. Here, the landscape becomes increasingly dramatic, and rising above the region is Mount Ararat. Few mountains in Türkiye carry such a powerful combination of geography and legend. Its enormous volcanic mass dominates the horizon. The summit rises into the clouds, and snow and ice often cover its upper slopes. For centuries, Mount Ararat has been associated with the biblical story of Noah's Ark. According to the book of Genesis, the Ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat after the flood. The story has inspired countless searches. Explorers have climbed the mountain. Researchers have examined satellite imagery and geological formations. Adventurers have reported unusual discoveries. But no definitive archaeological evidence has confirmed the existence of Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat. The mystery remains, and perhaps that mystery is precisely what gives the mountain its extraordinary power. A mountain can be measured, its height can be calculated, its geological history can be studied, but its meaning is created by human imagination. For millions of people, Ararat is more than a volcano. It is a symbol of survival after catastrophe, a symbol of hope, and a place where faith and geography meet. Farther into eastern Türkiye, another monument rises dramatically above the landscape. Ishak Pasha Palace appears almost like a fortress suspended among the mountains. Built during the Ottoman period, the palace combines architectural influences from Ottoman, Persian, and local traditions. Unlike a simple defensive fortress, it was designed as a large residential and administrative complex. Its walls, courtyards, gates, and decorative details reveal the ambitions of the people who built it. But the location may be even more impressive than the architecture. The palace overlooks a vast valley and distant mountains, creating a natural panorama that stretches toward Mount Ararat. Imagine living here centuries ago. The surrounding landscape would have been both beautiful and strategically important. Trade routes crossed the region. Armies moved through the mountains. Caravans carried goods between distant settlements. And the palace stood above it all, watching over the surrounding plains. Its position reflects a fundamental truth about architecture throughout history. Great buildings are rarely placed randomly. They are positioned according to water, trade, defense, geography, and power. Ishak Pasha Palace combines all of these elements. And when the sunlight falls across its stone walls, the building seems almost unreal. But Eastern Türkiye's history reaches back much further than the Ottoman period. Thousands of years before the palace was built, ancient civilizations were already shaping this region. One of the most important was the Hittite civilization. In central Anatolia, the Hittites created a powerful empire more than 3,000 years ago. Their capital was Hattusa. Today, the ruins of Hattusa provide one of the clearest windows into the ancient world of Anatolia. The city was strategically positioned among mountains and valleys, giving its rulers control over important routes. Massive walls once protected the settlement. Monumental gates marked entrances to the city. Temples and administrative buildings occupied important areas. And among the most famous features is the Lion Gate. Two enormous stone lions once stood as guardians at the entrance. Their forms symbolize strength and authority. Imagine approaching the city thousands of years ago. Before you would have risen immense defensive walls. Then the gate. Then the lions. They were not simply decorations. They were a statement. This was the capital of a powerful empire. Beyond the walls, the city contained temples, palaces, storage areas, and public spaces. The Hittites were skilled administrators, diplomats, and military leaders. They developed written records and maintained relations with neighboring powers. Their empire eventually disappeared, but the stones of Hattusa survived. Not far away lies Yazilikaya, another extraordinary Hittite site. The name can be translated as inscribed rock, and the site consists of natural rock chambers decorated with carved figures. The reliefs depict gods and divine beings moving across the stone. The carvings were part of a religious complex and may have been connected to ceremonies and seasonal cycles. Sunlight interacts with the rock formations, creating changing patterns of light and shadow. The effect is subtle but powerful. Thousands of years ago, people stood here looking at these same figures. They watched the sun move across the sky. They followed seasonal changes. They performed rituals. And they believed the divine world was present within the landscape. Today, the names of many of those gods are unfamiliar. The civilization that worshipped them is long gone. But the carvings remain. And through them, we can still glimpse a world that disappeared more than 3,000 years ago. This is what makes Eastern Turkey so fascinating. The land is not simply filled with ruins. It is filled with layers. An ancient Hittite city can exist within the same country as medieval Armenian churches. Ottoman palaces can stand beneath mountains associated with biblical legends. Modern towns can grow beside cemeteries that are centuries old. And natural landscapes can remain almost unchanged while human civilization transforms around them. The farther east we travel, the more the idea of Turkey as a simple bridge between Europe and Asia begins to feel incomplete. This country is not merely a bridge. It is a crossroads. A place where civilizations did not simply pass through. They settled. They fought. They traded. They worshipped. They built. They transformed the landscape. And eventually, they left. Yet traces of all of them remain. In stone, in language, in architecture, in legends, in cemeteries, and in the landscapes themselves. As evening approaches over Lake Van, the mountains become darker and the water reflects the final light. The distant peaks disappear into shadow. The ancient church on Akdamar becomes a silhouette. Far beyond the lake, Mount Ararat remains on the horizon. And for a moment, the entire region seems to exist outside ordinary time. Perhaps that is the greatest gift of Eastern Turkey. It reminds us how small one lifetime is compared with the history of the land. Kingdoms rise and disappear. Cities are abandoned. Languages change. Religions evolve. Borders move. But mountains remain. Rivers continue to flow. And the lakes continue to reflect the sky. Our journey now turns back toward the south, where the rugged mountains descend toward the Mediterranean. There, ancient fortresses rise above turquoise waters. Canyons cut through forests. Waterfalls disappear over cliffs. And forgotten cities hide among the trees. There is something extraordinary about Turkey's Mediterranean coast. The mountains do not simply end when they reach the sea. They rise dramatically behind it, creating a landscape where ancient fortresses stand above turquoise water, forests hide forgotten cities, and rivers cut through deep canyons before reaching the coast. Here, adventure and history exist side by side. A morning can begin among ancient stone walls and end beside the Mediterranean, with the mountains glowing beneath the final light of the sun. Our journey returns to the southern coast, where the Taurus Mountains form a dramatic natural barrier behind the Mediterranean shoreline. For thousands of years, these mountains have shaped life along the coast. They created natural defenses. They controlled travel routes. They supplied rivers and forests. And they separated coastal settlements from the interior of Anatolia. But people learned to cross them. Ancient roads climbed through mountain passes. Caravans carried goods between the coast and inland cities. Armies moved across the valleys. And today, these same landscapes have become some of the country's most spectacular destinations for exploration and adventure. One of the most dramatic examples is Alanya Castle. Rising above a rocky peninsula, the fortress dominates the coastline. Its walls follow the natural shape of the land, creating an enormous defensive system overlooking the Mediterranean. From below, the castle appears almost inseparable from the cliffs. From above, the view is completely different. The Mediterranean stretches toward the horizon, while the modern city of Alanya spreads along the shoreline. But centuries ago, this view had a very different purpose. The castle was a strategic stronghold. Its position allowed defenders to monitor ships approaching the coast and control access to the peninsula. The walls were reinforced with towers and gates, creating multiple layers of defense. Among the most famous structures is the Red Tower, an imposing octagonal building that became one of Alanya's most recognizable landmarks. Its thick walls were designed to withstand attacks, while its elevated position provided a commanding view over the harbor. Today, the tower has become a symbol of the city. The weapons and soldiers are gone. The battles are over. But the architecture remains. And standing on the fortress walls, it is easy to understand why this location was so valuable. The sea offered opportunity. The cliffs offered protection. And the mountains created a natural barrier behind them. Further along the coast, another fortress appears to rise directly from the sea. Kız Kalesi, or Maiden's Castle, stands on a small island just offshore. The site is striking. A massive stone fortress sits surrounded by blue Mediterranean water, separated from the mainland by a short stretch of sea. The castle's appearance has inspired legends for centuries. One popular story tells of a king who received a prophecy that his daughter would die from a snake bite. Desperate to protect her, he built a castle offshore and placed her there, believing the sea would keep her safe. But fate, according to the legend, found a way. A basket of grapes was brought to the castle. Hidden inside was a snake. The princess was bitten, and the prophecy came true. There is no historical evidence that this story actually happened. But legends like this reveal something important about the human relationship with old buildings. When people encounter structures whose origins are difficult to explain, they create stories. And those stories become part of the monument. Kız Kalesi is not simply a fortress anymore. It is also a legend. And as the sun reflects from its walls, it seems perfectly suited to one. From the mainland, another ancient fortress once stood facing it. The two structures were connected by a defensive breakwater, although much of that connection has disappeared. Today, they remain separated by water, two reminders of a time when the coastline was defended by stone. But the Mediterranean is not only a landscape of castles, It is also a place where ancient cities disappeared into forests. Olympos is one of the most atmospheric examples. Once an important Lycian and later Roman settlement, Olympos grew near the coast and benefited from its position along maritime routes. Over time, however, the city declined. Buildings collapsed. Population decreased. Nature slowly reclaimed the ruins. Today, walking through Olympos feels almost like entering a forgotten world. Stone walls disappear beneath trees. Ancient pathways are covered by vegetation. Ruined arches stand among the forest. The sounds of modern life become distant. And somewhere beyond the trees, the Mediterranean continues to move against the shore. This combination of forest, ruins, and sea creates a feeling that is difficult to reproduce anywhere else. Olympos does not feel like a traditional archaeological park. It feels alive. Nature has become part of the ruins. The trees grow around ancient stones. Roots pass beneath walls. Moss covers surfaces, and the landscape continues to change. Nearby, the natural flames of Yanatash add another layer of mystery. Gas escapes through cracks in the rock, creating flames that can burn continuously. Ancient people connected these fires with the mythical chimera, a creature said to breathe flames. Today, science can explain the geological process, but knowing the explanation does not necessarily make the experience less magical. Standing before a flame emerging naturally from the earth at night still feels extraordinary. And it is easy to imagine why ancient people created a myth around it. From the forests of Olympos, the journey continues toward another ancient coastal settlement. Simena, known today as Kalikoi, can only be reached by boat or on foot. That isolation has helped preserve its unique atmosphere. A Byzantine-era castle crowns the hill overlooking the sea. Below it are ancient remains scattered across the landscape. But the most fascinating part of Simena lies beneath the water. An ancient settlement was partially submerged after earthquakes and geological changes. Today, the sea covers streets and structures that once belonged to the living city. The site creates a strange connection between past and present. Above the water, boats move across the Mediterranean. Below the surface, ancient stones remain silent. The sea has become an archaeological archive, and the underwater ruins remind us that nature can transform human landscapes in ways no ruler or architect can control. But if Simena reveals the power of the sea, the mountains nearby reveal the power of rivers. Köprülü Canyon cuts through the rugged landscape of southern Türkiye. Its enormous walls rise above the Köprüçay River, creating a dramatic corridor through the mountains. The canyon was formed gradually as water carved through the rock over immense periods of time. Today, the same river has become a center for outdoor adventure. Hiking trails follow the canyon. Forests cover the surrounding slopes. Ancient bridges cross the river. And for those seeking excitement, the Köprüçay is one of Turkey's most popular destinations for whitewater rafting. But even here, adventure exists alongside history. Ancient roads once crossed these mountains. Stone bridges were constructed to connect settlements and trade routes. One of the most famous is the Oluk Bridge, built during the Roman period. Its stone arches remain a remarkable example of ancient engineering. Imagine crossing this bridge nearly 2,000 years ago. There would have been no modern roads, no engines, no asphalt, only the river below, the mountains above, and a narrow stone crossing built by Roman engineers. The bridge survives because it was designed to work with the landscape. Its arches allowed the river to pass beneath it. Its foundations were placed carefully within the canyon. And for centuries, travelers continued to use the route. Today, people cross it for a different reason. Not because they must reach the next Roman settlement, but because they want to experience the atmosphere of the ancient landscape. The same mountains remain. The same river continues to flow, and the bridge still connects one side of the canyon to the other. Farther toward Antalya, water creates another spectacular scene. The Duden waterfalls are divided into two main sections. The upper falls emerge from the river system before flowing through a green landscape. The lower falls are even more dramatic. Here, water plunges from the cliffs directly toward the Mediterranean. The sight of fresh water falling from a rocky cliff into the sea is one of the defining landscapes of the region. The waterfall also reveals the constant relationship between water and stone. Every drop contributes to erosion. Every season changes the flow. Every year, the river reshapes the landscape in small ways. What appears permanent is actually changing all the time. And that is true of nearly everything we have seen. Castles weather, ruins crumble, cliffs erode, rivers change course, cities disappear. But the transformation happens so slowly that we rarely notice it. Ancient people may have believed their monuments would last forever. Some have survived remarkably well. Others exist only as fragments. Yet even fragments can tell extraordinary stories. The Mediterranean coast is filled with such fragments. Ancient roads disappearing into forests, Roman theaters facing empty valleys, Lycian tombs carved into cliffs, fortresses above the sea, submerged cities beneath the waves, and natural landscapes that have inspired legends for thousands of years. Perhaps this is why the southern coast of Turkey feels like an adventure rather than simply a vacation. You can hike through forests and unexpectedly encounter an ancient ruin. You can swim beside a coastline where civilizations once traded. You can climb a fortress and look across a sea that carried Roman ships. You can walk through a canyon crossed by a bridge built nearly 2,000 years ago. And at night, you can watch flames rise from the earth itself. But there is another side of Turkey waiting ahead. The natural landscapes and ancient ruins are only part of the country's identity. Because eventually, every journey through Türkiye leads toward one extraordinary city. A city divided by a narrow waterway between Europe and Asia. A city that has served as the capital of empires. A city whose streets have carried emperors, sultans, merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, artists, and travelers for centuries. Its name has changed. Its rulers have changed. Its religions and cultures have evolved. But the city has remained. Istanbul. As the Mediterranean fades behind us and the road turns north, we move toward the Bosphorus. And there, another chapter of Türkiye begins. A chapter of domes and minarets, of palaces and fortresses, of ancient walls and crowded markets, of Byzantium, Constantinople, and Istanbul. A city where Europe and Asia face each other across the water, and where the history of an entire country seems to converge. Istanbul is a city that does not simply sit between two continents. It seems to hold them together. Across the Bosphorus, Europe and Asia face one another, separated by water yet connected by thousands of years of trade, migration, war, faith, and culture. Few places on earth have witnessed such a concentration of history. Before it was Istanbul, it was Byzantium. Later, it became Constantinople, the magnificent capital of the Byzantine Empire. In 1453, the city was conquered by the Ottomans and entered another extraordinary chapter of its history. For centuries afterward, it remained the heart of the Ottoman Empire. Today, modern Istanbul surrounds the monuments left behind by these civilizations. Ferries cross the Bosphorus. Cars move through crowded streets. Towers rise behind ancient domes. Yet beneath the noise of the modern metropolis, the old city is still there. And perhaps nowhere is that sense of history stronger than around Sultan Ahmet. Here, several of Turkiye's most recognizable monuments stand almost within walking distance of one another. The first is the Blue Mosque. Its official name is the Sultan Ahmed Mosque, but visitors around the world know it by the color of the thousands of blue Iznik tiles decorating its interior. The mosque was commissioned by Sultan Ahmed I in the early 17th century and designed by the Ottoman architect Sedefkar Mehmed Aga. Its enormous central dome rises above a series of smaller domes, creating a powerful silhouette against the Istanbul skyline. But the mosque is perhaps even more impressive from inside. Light enters through hundreds of windows, illuminating intricate tilework, calligraphy, and geometric patterns. The interior creates a feeling of enormous space. And then there are the minarets. The mosque originally became famous for having 6 minarets, something considered unusual at the time. The number created controversy because the Grand Mosque in Mecca also had 6 minarets. To resolve the issue, another minaret was added to the mosque in Mecca. What may seem like a small architectural detail therefore became part of a much larger story involving religious symbolism and imperial prestige. Just across the square stands a building with an even longer history. Hagia Sophia. Few structures in the world have experienced as many transformations as this one. The building was completed in the 6th century under the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I. At the time, it was one of the greatest architectural achievements on Earth. Its enormous dome seemed almost impossible. For centuries, Hagia Sophia remained one of the world's largest churches and the center of Eastern Roman Christianity. Then came 1453. Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Empire. The building was transformed into a mosque. Minarets were added. Islamic architectural elements appeared. Christian mosaics were covered or altered in various periods. Centuries later, in 1935, Hagia Sophia became a museum. And in 2020, it was reconverted into a mosque. Today, its interior reflects layers of this complicated history. Christian mosaics exist alongside Islamic calligraphy. Byzantine architecture meets Ottoman additions. A building created for one empire became part of another, and eventually became one of the most famous monuments in modern Türkiye. Standing beneath its enormous dome, it is difficult to think of Hagia Sophia as belonging to only one civilization. It belongs to a much longer story, a story of transformation. And perhaps that is why it remains so powerful. Not far away lies Topkapı Palace, the former heart of Ottoman imperial life. For nearly 4 centuries, the palace served as the main residence and administrative center of Ottoman sultans. But Topkapı is not a single building. It is an enormous complex of courtyards, gardens, chambers, kitchens, administrative spaces, and ceremonial areas. At its height, thousands of people lived and worked within the palace complex. The imperial kitchens alone were enormous. Hundreds of cooks prepared food for the court, producing thousands of meals each day. The palace also contained the famous harem, where members of the sultan's family and household lived. Behind the walls, imperial politics unfolded. Decisions were made here that affected territories stretching across Europe, Asia, and North Africa. Ambassadors arrived. Princes were raised. Sultans ruled. Ceremonies took place, and enormous wealth accumulated behind the palace walls. Today, Topkapi Palace houses collections of Ottoman weapons, clothing, manuscripts, religious objects, ceramics, and imperial treasures. But perhaps the greatest treasure is its location. From the palace grounds, the Bosphorus opens before you. The water separates two continents. Ships move between the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara, and the skyline reveals centuries of architectural history. From this viewpoint, Istanbul's strategic importance becomes obvious. Whoever controlled this city controlled one of the most important crossroads between Europe and Asia. The Bosphorus was not simply beautiful, it was power. And one of the structures built to control it was Rumeli Fortress. On the European side of the Bosphorus, its massive walls rise directly above the water. The fortress was constructed in 1452 by Sultan Mehmed II, shortly before the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople. Remarkably, it was built in only a few months. Its purpose was straightforward: control the Bosphorus, prevent enemy ships from supplying Constantinople, and prepare for the final siege of the Byzantine capital. 3 enormous towers dominate the fortress, connected by thick defensive walls. From the top, the strategic logic is obvious. The Bosphorus narrows here. Any ship passing through could be observed. The fortress transformed the waterway into a controlled corridor. When Constantinople finally fell in 1453, the balance of power in the region changed forever. Today, the fortress has a very different atmosphere. The soldiers are gone. The cannons are silent. Visitors walk along the old walls and look across the water. But the architecture still carries the tension of its original purpose. A few kilometers away, another Ottoman masterpiece dominates the skyline: the Süleymaniye Mosque. Commissioned by Sultan Süleyman the Magnificent and designed by the legendary architect Mimar Sinan, it is one of the greatest achievements of Ottoman architecture. The mosque was completed in the 16th century and designed as part of a larger complex. It included educational institutions, a hospital, a kitchen, and other facilities. This was not simply a place of worship. It was a center of community life. Sinan's architecture emphasizes balance, proportion, and light. The central dome creates an enormous open interior, while the supporting structures distribute the weight with remarkable precision. The mosque also occupies an elevated position overlooking the Golden Horn and the Bosphorus. From the surrounding grounds, Istanbul spreads outward in every direction. The domes of other mosques appear between buildings. Ferries move across the water. Modern towers rise behind historic neighborhoods, and the city continues to expand around monuments that have stood for centuries. Another iconic mosque rises on the Asian side of Istanbul. The Çamlıca Mosque, completed in the 21st century, represents a very different era of Turkish architecture. It is one of the largest mosques in Turkey and can accommodate tens of thousands of worshippers. Its enormous dome and 6 minarets dominate the skyline from the surrounding hills. Inside, traditional Islamic artistic elements meet modern construction. Calligraphy, geometric designs, and decorative tilework reflect centuries of Ottoman and Islamic artistic traditions. Yet the building itself belongs unmistakably to the modern era. It demonstrates something important about Istanbul. The city does not exist only in the past. It continues to build. It continues to change. And it continues to reinterpret its architectural heritage. But perhaps the best way to understand Istanbul is not from inside a monument. It is from the water. Take a ferry across the Bosphorus and the entire city begins to make sense. On one side is Europe. On the other is Asia. Palaces line the shoreline. Mosques rise behind neighborhoods. Ancient fortifications appear between modern buildings. Luxury residences stand beside historic wooden houses. And enormous ships pass through the same waterway that has carried merchants and armies for thousands of years. The Bosphorus is constantly moving, and Istanbul moves with it. The city has always been connected to water. Its location made it rich. Its location made it vulnerable. And its location made it one of the most desired cities in history. But Istanbul's history does not end with its grand monuments. Some of its most fascinating stories are hidden underground. Beneath the streets of the historic city lies the Basilica Cistern, an enormous underground water reservoir constructed during the Byzantine period. Hundreds of columns support its vast interior. Water once flowed through channels and aqueducts into the reservoir, providing the city with an essential supply during times of siege or drought. Today, dim lighting reflects across the water, creating an atmosphere unlike almost anywhere else in Istanbul. Among the columns are two enormous Medusa heads. Their origins and original purpose remain subjects of debate, but their presence adds another layer of mystery to the underground chamber. Above ground, Istanbul can feel overwhelming. Traffic, crowds, ferries, markets, sounds, movement. But underground, everything changes. The city becomes quiet. The water barely moves, and the ancient columns disappear into darkness. It is a reminder that Istanbul has always had another world beneath the visible one. As evening arrives, the city begins to glow. The minarets become silhouettes. The Bosphorus reflects the lights of ferries. The domes of the historic skyline shine against the darkening sky, and millions of people continue moving through streets that have been traveled for centuries. Perhaps that is the true wonder of Istanbul. It is not frozen in history. It is alive. The same city that once welcomed Roman emperors later became the capital of Byzantine rulers and then the center of the Ottoman Empire. Today, it is a modern metropolis of millions, yet the layers remain visible. Byzantine walls, Ottoman mosques, ancient cisterns, imperial palaces, modern bridges, contemporary neighborhoods, all exist together. And as our journey leaves Istanbul behind, the story of Turkey moves once again toward the ancient civilizations that existed long before the modern nation. Beyond the great cities and famous monuments lie forgotten archaeological sites, ancient temples, mysterious ruins, and landscapes where history seems almost untouched. Long before Turkey became a modern nation, before the Ottoman Empire rose, before Byzantium and Rome transformed Anatolia, this land was already home to powerful kingdoms, sacred cities, wealthy ports, and civilizations whose stories still survive in stone. Across the plains and mountains of Turkey, ancient cities appear almost unexpectedly. A ruined temple beside a modern road, a theater hidden beneath a hillside, a carved tomb overlooking the sea, a city gate standing alone against the sky. These are not simply ruins. They are fragments of worlds that once seemed permanent. Our journey now moves deeper into the ancient heart of Anatolia, beginning with a city whose name has become almost inseparable from one of history's greatest legends, Troy. For centuries, Troy existed somewhere between history and mythology. The city was made famous by Homer's epic stories of the Trojan War, a conflict involving heroes, kings, armies, and the legendary wooden horse. But for a long time, scholars questioned whether Troy had ever truly existed. Then, in the 19th century, excavations began revealing something extraordinary. Not one city, but multiple layers of cities built on the same location. Archaeologists identified several major settlements, each representing a different period of human occupation. The oldest layers stretch back more than 4,000 years. This means that when we walk through Troy today, we are not walking through the remains of a single civilization. We are moving through layers of human history. One city rose. It declined. Another was built over it. Then another. Generations continued to rebuild on the same ground. And eventually the stories of Troy became larger than the physical city itself. The Trojan War became one of the most famous stories of the ancient world. Whether every detail of Homer's account is historically accurate remains debated, but there is no doubt that Troy was a real and important settlement. Standing among its ruins, the boundary between mythology and archaeology begins to disappear. You can look across the landscape and imagine armies approaching, ships arriving along the coast, messengers carrying news, and a city waiting behind its walls. But Troy is only one chapter of Anatolia's ancient story. Further south, the ruins of Ephesus reveal what a great Mediterranean city looked like during the height of the Roman world. We have already seen its theatre and library of Celsus, but the scale of Ephesus deserves another look. At its height, this was a city of enormous wealth and influence. Its streets were lined with monumental buildings. Its markets were filled with goods. Its harbor connected it to the Mediterranean, and its temples attracted pilgrims from distant regions. The Temple of Artemis once stood among the greatest religious structures of the ancient world. Today, only fragments remain. A few stones, a reconstructed column, scattered remains, yet its reputation survives. The temple was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a list created to celebrate the greatest monuments known to ancient travelers. The fact that almost nothing remains makes its history even more fascinating. Sometimes the absence of a monument can be more powerful than the monument itself. We are forced to imagine it, and imagination can create something enormous. From Ephesus, the ancient road continues toward Pamukkale. Here, nature itself becomes the monument. White terraces cover the hillside like frozen waves. Warm, mineral-rich water flows across the formations, leaving behind deposits of calcium carbonate. Over time, layer after layer accumulated. The result is a landscape that seems almost artificial. Pools of turquoise water sit within brilliant white terraces. From a distance, the hillside can look like snow. But this is not snow. It is mineral. And beneath these terraces lies another ancient city, Hierapolis. The city was founded near the thermal springs and became an important center during the Hellenistic and Roman periods. People traveled here seeking the supposed healing benefits of the warm waters. The ancient world understood natural springs differently from modern science. Water emerging from the earth could be considered sacred. Its warmth could be interpreted as a sign of divine power, and its mineral properties could be associated with healing. Hierapolis grew around this natural wonder. The city eventually contained temples, baths, theaters, streets, and monumental tombs. Today, visitors can walk among these ruins while looking across the same white terraces that attracted people thousands of years ago. It is one of the rare places where a natural landscape and an ancient city remain connected so clearly. The earth created the springs. Humans built a city around them, and both survived. Further into Anatolia, another ancient city tells a very different story. Sagalassos. High in the mountains of southwestern Türkiye, Sagalassos once flourished as an important city. Its elevation gave it a dramatic setting, but also meant that its inhabitants had to adapt to a challenging environment. The city became known for trade, craftsmanship, and monumental architecture. Then earthquakes struck. Major earthquakes damaged the city, and over time, its population declined. Eventually, Sagalassos was abandoned. But something unexpected happened. The ruins became buried beneath layers of rubble and soil. Instead of destroying the remains completely, this natural cover helped preserve them. For centuries, Sagalassos remained hidden. When archaeologists began excavating the site, they uncovered remarkably well-preserved structures. One of the most impressive is the monumental fountain. Its reconstructed facade and flowing water provide a rare sense of what the ancient city might have looked like when it was alive. Imagine standing here centuries ago, water flowing through the fountain, people gathering nearby, markets operating, travelers passing through, and the mountains surrounding the city. Today, the crowds are gone, but the fountain continues to bring the ancient city back to life. Another remarkable archaeological site lies near the modern town of Demre, ancient Myra. The city became one of the most important settlements of ancient Lycia. Its most recognizable features are the rock-cut tombs carved into the cliffs. The tombs appear like monumental houses suspended above the ground. Their facades contain columns, doorways, and architectural details designed to resemble the homes of the living. This was not accidental. The Lycians believed that the dead continued their existence in another world. High placement was associated with helping the dead reach the afterlife. The cliffs therefore became enormous cemeteries, and thousands of years later, the tombs still overlook the valley. Near Myra stands another monument connected with one of history's most familiar names, Saint Nicholas. The Christian bishop who lived in this region became famous for his generosity and care for children. Centuries later, traditions surrounding him evolved into the legendary figure of Santa Claus. It is fascinating to realize that one of the world's most recognizable holiday characters has roots in ancient Lycia. The modern image of Santa Claus may be very different from the historical Saint Nicholas, but the connection remains part of the cultural story of this region. From Myra, the road continues toward the ancient city of Perge. Located near Antalya, Perge became an important center during the Greek and Roman periods. Its ruins reveal broad streets, monumental columns, baths, fountains, and public buildings. Unlike some ancient cities that survive only as scattered fragments, Perge still gives visitors a sense of urban scale. The ancient street stretches forward between rows of columns. Imagine walking through this space nearly 2,000 years ago. The sound of footsteps would have mixed with voices from nearby shops. Merchants would have displayed goods. Officials would have traveled through the city. And water would have flowed through elaborate fountains and channels. Roman cities were carefully designed environments. Public spaces were not simply decorative. They demonstrated the power and wealth of the state. The architecture communicated order. The roads connected different parts of the city. The baths provided places for relaxation and social interaction. The theaters brought people together, and the temples connected the city to its religious traditions. Further west, The ancient ruins of Didyma reveal another dimension of Greek civilization. The Temple of Apollo at Didyma was one of the most important religious centers of the ancient world. Its enormous columns were designed to create a sense of overwhelming scale. The temple was associated with an oracle where people traveled to seek divine guidance. The structure we see today was never fully completed, making its unfinished state part of its story. Massive columns rise toward the sky. Some stand, others lie broken on the ground. The sheer size of the remains gives an idea of the ambition behind the project. Religious architecture in the ancient world was often designed to inspire awe. The visitor was supposed to feel small. The gods were supposed to feel enormous, and the temple achieved that through scale. Not far away lies another ancient city connected to the world of Greek and Roman culture, Priene. Unlike some cities that expanded organically over centuries, Priene was carefully planned. Its streets followed a grid system. Public buildings were arranged according to a deliberate urban plan. The city was built on a slope overlooking the surrounding landscape. From its ruins, the ancient planner's vision is still visible. The streets descend toward the valley. Stone walls divide public and private spaces, and the remains of temples and theaters reveal how the city was organized. It is a reminder that ancient civilizations were not primitive societies wandering without structure. They were capable of sophisticated urban planning, engineering, mathematics, architecture, and administration. And perhaps the most fascinating part is how much of that knowledge disappeared. Civilizations rise and fall. Skills are forgotten. Buildings collapse. Languages vanish. Yet the stones remain. Türkiye is filled with these reminders. Troy tells us about the meeting point between myth and archaeology. Ephesus reveals the scale of Roman civilization. Pamukkale shows how nature could create a sacred destination. Sagalassos demonstrates how disaster can unexpectedly preserve history. Myra reveals ancient beliefs about death. Purge shows the sophistication of Roman urban life. Didyma reveals the power of ancient religion. And Priene demonstrates the intelligence behind ancient city planning. But there is still one question. How did all these civilizations survive, transform, and eventually disappear? The answer is written across Anatolia itself. Earthquakes changed cities. Wars destroyed kingdoms. Trade routes shifted. Rivers moved. Coastlines changed. New religions replaced old ones. New empires absorbed older cultures. Yet very little truly disappeared. Old stones were reused. Ancient roads became medieval routes. Temples became foundations for later buildings. Cities were rebuilt on top of older cities, and stories passed from one generation to another. This is why Türkiye feels so different from a traditional historical destination. History here is not contained inside museums. It is everywhere. In the landscape, in the mountains, in the villages, in the ruins, in the names of places, and sometimes in the stories people still tell. As the sun begins to fall over the ancient ruins, the stones become golden. The shadows stretch across streets that have not heard the footsteps of their original inhabitants for centuries. A broken column stands against the sky. A theater waits in silence. A tomb remains carved into a cliff. And somewhere beyond the ruins, modern Türkiye continues. The ancient world is gone, but its traces remain, and our journey is not finished. Because beyond the archaeological wonders of Anatolia lies another side of Türkiye, one defined by spectacular waterfalls, enormous lakes, mysterious caves, and landscapes that prove nature can be just as powerful as any empire. The next chapter will take us deeper into Türkiye's natural wonders, where rivers carve canyons, waterfalls plunge from mountains, and hidden landscapes reveal a country far more diverse than it first appears. There is a final side of Turkey that cannot be understood through its cities, palaces, or ancient ruins alone. It is the Türkiye created by water, wind, fire, and stone. A country where rivers cut through mountains, waterfalls plunge into deep valleys, enormous lakes stretch beneath volcanic peaks, and hidden landscapes seem to have been designed by nature itself. After thousands of years of human history, we return to something much older: the land. And perhaps the greatest surprise is how dramatically that land can change from one region to another. In the north, forests cover steep mountains. In the east, volcanic peaks dominate immense plateaus. In the south, the Taurus Mountains descend toward the Mediterranean. And across the country, rivers have spent millions of years carving their way through rock. One of the most spectacular examples is Tortum Waterfall in northeastern Turkey. Water pours dramatically over a high cliff, creating a powerful curtain that disappears into the valley below. The waterfall was formed after a landslide blocked part of the Tortum Valley, creating a natural lake and eventually producing the waterfall system we see today. But Tortum is more than a beautiful natural attraction. Its powerful waters have also become part of Türkiye's modern energy infrastructure. A hydroelectric facility nearby uses the movement of water to generate electricity. It is a fascinating meeting of nature and technology. The same force that carved the landscape is now being used by people. Water becomes energy. The river becomes a source of power. And the ancient relationship between humans and nature continues in a modern form. Further east, another waterfall reveals the extraordinary diversity of Turkey's landscapes. Muradiye Waterfall lies along the Bendimahi River near Lake Van. The river rushes over a rocky ledge before descending into a dramatic gorge surrounded by green vegetation. During warmer months, the area becomes a peaceful escape. In winter, however, the landscape can transform completely. Ice and snow cover the rocks, and sections of the waterfall can freeze, creating an entirely different world. This seasonal transformation is one of the great attractions of Turkey. The same destination can look completely different depending on the time of year. But the country's greatest natural landscapes are not always waterfalls. Sometimes they are enormous bodies of water. Lake Van is one of the most spectacular. We have already seen its connection to ancient civilizations and legends, but its physical scale deserves another look. The lake is enormous. Its deep blue waters stretch toward distant mountains, creating the impression of an inland sea. The surrounding volcanic landscape gives it an almost otherworldly atmosphere. And because the lake has no natural outlet to the ocean, its chemistry is unusual. The alkaline water supports a unique ecosystem, including the famous Lake Van fish, which has adapted to these conditions. The lake also changes dramatically with weather. Under clear skies, the water can appear intensely blue. When storms move across the mountains, the surface becomes dark and restless. At sunset, the entire lake can turn gold. It is a landscape that never looks exactly the same twice. Another lake offers a completely different experience. Lake Tuz, or the Salt Lake, lies across the central Anatolian plateau. It is one of the largest lakes in Turkey and one of the most remarkable salt landscapes in the country. During dry periods, much of the lake becomes covered with a thick layer of salt. The surface can appear almost endless, like a white desert extending toward the horizon. At certain times of the year, microorganisms can produce striking colors in the water, creating shades that range from pale pink to deeper red. The contrast between the white salt and colored water creates a surreal scene. It feels less like Turkey and more like another planet. But Lake Tuz is also an important ecological environment. The surrounding wetlands provide habitat for numerous bird species, including flamingos. Thousands of birds can gather in the region, transforming the stark landscape into a place filled with movement and sound. It is another reminder that even the harshest environments can support life. And then there is Lake Salda. Often described as one of Turkey's most beautiful lakes, Salda is famous for its turquoise water and bright white mineral formations along the shore. The lake is unusually deep and contains minerals that have attracted scientific attention. In particular, hydromagnesite deposits found around Lake Salda have similarities to mineral formations associated with ancient environments on Mars. Scientists have studied the area because it provides a useful natural comparison for understanding geological processes that may have occurred on the Red Planet. Standing beside the lake, it is difficult to imagine that this peaceful turquoise landscape could have anything to do with Mars. But that is what makes Earth so extraordinary. Sometimes the most valuable clues about distant worlds can be found in places that seem completely familiar. From lakes, we move toward the canyons. Turkey contains some extraordinary river-carved landscapes, and one of the most impressive is Ulubey Canyon in western Turkey. Over immense periods of time, flowing water cut deeply into the rock, creating a complex system of gorges and cliffs. Today, wooden walking paths and viewing platforms allow visitors to experience the canyon from above. The scale becomes clear when you look across the valley. The cliffs drop away beneath you. Layers of rock reveal the geological history of the region. And far below, the river continues the work it began millions of years ago. Nature rarely builds quickly. It builds slowly. A river may appear weak compared with a mountain, but given enough time, water can reshape entire landscapes. That same principle can be seen in Köprülü Canyon. Here, the Köprüçay River has carved through the Taurus Mountains, producing steep cliffs, forests, and narrow gorges. The canyon is now one of Turkey's most popular destinations for rafting, but the landscape has been attracting people for far longer than adventure tourism. Ancient bridges cross the river. Old roads follow the canyon, and archaeological remains show that these mountains were once part of important transportation routes. The Roman engineers who built the bridges understood the river. They did not try to defeat it. They designed structures that worked with its flow. Today, visitors can stand on the same ancient bridge and watch rafts move through the water below. It is a remarkable contrast. The bridge belongs to the ancient world. The rafting belongs to the modern one. But both are connected by the same river. Another canyon in southern Turkey offers a similar combination of nature and history. Kulu Canyon stretches through a mountainous landscape where the river has carved deep passages through the rock. Ancient bridges remain in the region, including structures dating back to Roman times. Walking through the canyon, it becomes possible to understand why ancient civilizations settled along rivers. Water provided life. It allowed agriculture. It created transportation routes. It connected communities. And sometimes it created spectacular scenery. But Türkiye's natural wonders are not limited to water. Some of its most mysterious landscapes are created by fire beneath the earth. Volcanic mountains dominate parts of the country. Mount Hassan rises above central Anatolia. Mount Ararat dominates the east. And throughout Cappadocia, ancient volcanic activity created the soft rock formations that humans later transformed into homes and churches. The same geological forces that once seemed destructive eventually created some of Turkey's greatest landscapes. Fire created the rock. Water carved it. Wind shaped it. And people adapted to it. This relationship between humans and nature appears again at Pamukkale. The white terraces were formed by mineral-rich thermal water. The same springs that created the landscape attracted people for thousands of years. Hierapolis developed beside them. People came for bathing, for healing, for religion, for trade. And today, millions of visitors continue to be fascinated by the same natural phenomenon. It is almost as if time has changed everything around the springs except the springs themselves. The water still emerges from underground. It still flows across the hillside. It still leaves mineral deposits behind. And it still transforms the landscape. There is something deeply humbling about witnessing a natural process that existed before the first cities of Anatolia. Long before kings built palaces, before Roman engineers constructed roads, before Ottoman sultans ruled, the earth was already creating these landscapes, and it will continue long after modern cities have changed. Perhaps that is the most powerful lesson of Türkiye. Its history is enormous. Its monuments are extraordinary. Its civilizations have shaped world history. But nature remains the oldest storyteller. A waterfall remembers no emperor. A mountain recognizes no border. A river does not care which civilization controls its banks. A lake continues to reflect the sky regardless of who stands beside it. And the rocks remain after the names of kings have disappeared. As our journey reaches its final moments, imagine the country from above. The Mediterranean shining beneath the Taurus Mountains. Cappadocia's fairy chimneys stretching across central Anatolia. The ancient ruins of Ephesus standing beneath the western sun. Pamukkale glowing white against the landscape. Lake Van spreading beneath the eastern mountains. Mount Ararat rising toward the clouds. Istanbul connecting Europe and Asia across the Bosphorus. And thousands of years of history connecting them all. Türkiye is not one story. It is thousands of stories layered on top of one another. Greek and Roman, Byzantine and Ottoman, Lycian and Hittite, Armenian and Anatolian, ancient and modern, natural and human. Each has left something behind. A monument, a road, a legend, a ruin, a city, a landscape. And when these fragments are placed together, they create something extraordinary. A country that feels less like a destination and more like a journey through time. From the flames of Yanataş to the waters of Lake Van, from the ancient walls of Troy to the domes of Istanbul, from the hidden chambers of Cappadocia to the white terraces of Pamukkale, from Mediterranean castles to forgotten mountain cities. Türkiye constantly reminds us that the world is far larger, older, and more mysterious than we imagine. And perhaps the greatest wonder is not any single place. It is the journey between them. Because every road across Türkiye reveals another landscape. Every valley hides another story. Every ancient stone raises another question. And every horizon seems to invite us farther. So, as the final light disappears across Anatolia, the journey comes to an end. But the stories remain. The mountains will still stand. The rivers will continue carving their paths. The ruins will continue watching over the valleys. The Bosphorus will continue carrying ships between two continents. And somewhere beneath the stars, the ancient landscapes of Türkiye will continue to hold the memories of the civilizations that once called this extraordinary land home. This is Türkiye, a country where continents meet, where civilizations overlap, where legends survive, and where nature has spent millions of years creating landscapes worthy of wonder. And perhaps that is why, after thousands of years, Turkey still feels like a place waiting to be discovered.